I'd like to welcome you to today's program on U.S.-Japan Relations Seminar. I'm Susan Pharr, Director. Today's session is part of a series that the U.S.-Japan program has had with the Reischauer Institute of Japanese Studies on post-disaster Japan. Our speaker today is Jun Saito. The seminar is co-sponsored not only by Reischauer Institute, but also, may I mention, at the Kennedy School, there's the Environment and Natural Resources Program, and also the project on managing the atom. Both of those projects join with us today in sponsoring this series. Both are part of the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs. Jun Saito is Assistant Professor of Political Science at Yale. He received his bachelor's degree and his MA degree from Sophia University, or Jochi, in Tokyo. He received his PhD from Yale. His publications include a book that I'll pass around on the political economy of the LDP regime, coming out, which is out in Japanese from 2010. This will also be very shortly coming out in English. In the Japanese edition, it was the winner of the 54th Nikkei Cultural Award for Publications, and also the winner of the Annual Book Award for the Network of Policy Analysis. He's had numerous articles, including a co-authored article in the American Journal of Political Science, which won the Rosenthal Award from the Legislative Studies section of the American Political Science Association. And among the other things fascinating about his background, he was a member of the Democratic Party of Japan. He was a member from 2002 to 2003. So it was a short political life, but I'm sure a very rich one. And you have many stories to tell us about. His seminar today is, Do Nuclear Power Plants Benefit Japan's Local Communities?
Thank you very much, Susan. I feel very honored to have this opportunity to talk about the local government finance and nuclear power plants in Japan. I feel especially honored to deliver a talk at Harvard, where Susan mentioned that I had a very brief career in politics. While I was in the Japanese parliament, I ran for 2 elections. One was the by-election, which refilled the vacancy created by resignation of one of the Harvard graduates, actually. And Mr. Koichi Kato used to be regarded as a prospective, one of the candidates for a prospective prime minister, and I filled his vacancy. And when I tried to get reelected, he tried to come back. And I think that was a very easy game for him. And although I doubled the DPJ's vote share in that particular district, that was not enough. And I'm still repaying my election debt. And that was already 10 years ago. I learned a lot about politics, and my dissertation, which turned out to be the book which is being circulated right now, reflects my experience. I'm a sort of political anthropologist in the sense that I built up the formal models in the book out of my field research experience, and a lot of intuitions behind econometric models actually from my own experience. So it's a kind of fancy combination of quantitative political science backed by in-depth immersion to the field. So that's it for the sales talk for my own book. I'm now preparing the English manuscript of the book, so whatever comments you might have, I'd highly appreciate your feedback. So today, what I'm going to talk about is whether the nuclear power plants, housing nuclear power plants in the local community actually benefited the communities or residents at large. And I'd like to come up with some sort of quantitative measure of the benefits and the idea of who was intensively gaining the benefits. So let me talk a little bit about the motivation. As I started a career of political scientist, I collected a whole variety of natural disaster data. One important motivation was that the disasters often provide useful or insightful shocks which give a lot of hints about what was actually going on in the political process. And because of the shocks, the sort of scandals and institutional failures, regulatory captures that are usually masked in the day-to-day political operations get revealed as a result of the big shocks. And disasters also provide a lot of useful hints about the whole variety of policy distortions. And Japan is actually subject to a whole variety of problems related to high cost of construction, which may be actually out of the difficulty of verifiability and uncertainty related to construction standard and so on. And, well, civil society and disaster, social aspects of disaster also attract our attention. And I will try to talk a little bit more of this toward the later segment of my talk. Anyway, whenever you have questions, please feel free to make an intervention. So the overview of the disaster. So March 11 seems to be a distant memory, but the large magnitude earthquake caused a casualty of near 20,000, which is combining both confirmed deaths and the number of missing people. And the monetary damage as well as the quantitative damage to the houses and properties are very large. Despite this big magnitude of monetary and personal losses, the Japanese society and the private sector showed a remarkable resilience to the shock. The Japanese manufacturing companies, for instance, collected a very large number of engineers to recover the supply chains, for instance. And the Japanese ordinary citizens lined up in front of convenience stores for hours without any sort of looting. That sort of remarkable responses are often admired. But on the other hand, what has attracted a whole variety of criticism about the Japanese government handling of the disaster was basically what to do with the nuclear accidents in Fukushima, which is one of the focus of today's talk. I think the government did a great job in initial response in terms of mobilizing the self-defense force, teaming up with the foreign governments in building up the rescue operation, especially the United States government. But on the other hand, what to do with nuclear power plants was a little bit of disappointment for both the Japanese as well as non-Japanese citizens. Perhaps the magnitude of the nuclear accident was so large that no other government might have been handling the accident properly. But from the vantage point of 1 year later, what was going on behind the scene, inciting the nuclear power plants and regulating the nuclear industry gives us a lot of puzzles. And I'd like to try to approach some of the aspects of it. So this is basically the seismological map. And I have to say that 10% of natural earthquakes which happen in the world annually takes place in Japan's vicinity. And Japan is equipped with as many as 54 nuclear reactors given this environmental surroundings. And this is the idea of economic damage the March 11th earthquake caused. And this is the lighting, satellite image of the lights in the night in Japan. And on the day of the earthquake, the lighting in this area was lost. And the total devastation of economic activities in this area can be easily captured by this satellite image. And
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Could you go back to that slide?
Yep.
My understanding is that southern Japan has one grid which is not really connected to the northern Japanese grid. But it looks as if Hokkaido has its own grid which is not connected to the northern.
Well, Hokkaido was not subjected to the big seismological shock in this particular earthquake.
Right, but is
And the grid line, the frequency of the electricity is divided across this area. Because of the shutdown of the nuclear power plants and suspension of some of the utility lines, this was the area that suffered power outage for several years. So this is how the Fukushima nuclear reactors looked on March 24th. And as you know, there were multiple reactors which was damaged by the explosion and so on. And the conventional understanding is that the tsunami failed the cooling system, although there seems to have other factors that caused the accident, such as failing of the utility poles that transmitted electricity from outside sources and so on. In addition to that, the initial shock seems to have failed some of the vessels. And this is the idea of fallouts of radioactive substances after the accident. And depending upon the direction of the winds when the nuclear emission was taking place, as well as the shape of the land terrain, the density of the nuclear substances was not necessarily following the circular random pattern. And there seems to have been some sort of unpredictable pattern in it. And the question is, it's clear that the accident caused massive damage to the properties as well as falling prices of produce and so on. And children and younger generation might face health risks. But on the other hand, despite this sort of large-scale accident, exports compensation from the TEPCO companies or the government seems to be obviously insufficient. And you might know about the fact that local residents who are demanding compensation for the damage need to actually fill out 60-page long document. And that tells us the sort of magnitude of bureaucracy in this operation. But what is clear is that the amount of compensation for the accident is not necessarily in good shape. But despite this, Japan is equipped with as many as 54 nuclear reactors. Then, if the people had known about this, how come the local communities accommodated the nuclear power plants? Was there a large amount of financial inflow to the local community which might have sued the local opposition. That's the sort of question I am addressing. If the government was paying the compensation ex ante to curb the risk, to compensate for the perceived risk, how much was actually paid to the concerned citizens? That's the sort of questions, empirical questions I am dealing with right now. So my dissertation actually focused on pork barrel politics, which is part of the distributive politics. And in many senses, NIMBY politics, nuclear facility, is one example of what is NIMBY sites. And the NIMBY site, not in my backyard sites, are examples of negative version of pork barrel politics. And it's usually the case that NIMBY sites serve the benefit of the many at the cost of the few. And unless you compensate for the people who suffer from the damage, nobody would want to accommodate the NIMBY sites, not in my backyard sites. Then the question is, what sort of strategies has the government or the utility companies have adopted to get those projects admitted in the local community? What sort of consequences entailed? Those are the empirical questions. But when you talk about the method of side payment, there can be a whole variety of tactics. You can deliver the compensation in terms of public goods, or you can deliver more or less of private goods. How the government adopted what is called the divide and conquer strategy to soothe the local opposition might also be an interesting aspect of this sort of NIMBY siting, NIMBY facility siting problems. Before we go into the aftermath of nuclear facility siting, let me talk a little bit about where nuclear power plants are located. My hypothesis is basically that nuclear power plants are located in areas that are close enough but far enough to the area which are densely populated. And because this sort of coordination of side payments requires a lot of political coordination, LDP areas that are represented by senior LDP politicians would be positively correlated with the nuclear facility siting. Dan Aldrich did an excellent research on a similar, the same issue, in which his primary explanatory variable was the strength of the civil society. Well, this may be a flip side of the strength of the civil society, but I adopted the LDP's vote share as well as the seniority as one of the key correlates of predicting nuclear facility siting. So the data set in this is Japanese municipalities between 1960 and 2003. And the cross-section sample size is something like 3,200. And I adopted what is called proportional hazard analysis, which is basically survival analysis that taps how long it takes until a failure, in this particular case, location of the nuclear power plant takes. As you vary the covariate, how would you predict the time until the completion of nuclear power plants? That's the sort of question. So Japan has 54 nuclear reactors. This is a topological map. And if you surround these nuclear power plants with 200-kilometer circles, most parts of the Japanese archipelago is already covered by that. And the way we read this sort of table is that the number larger than 1 has some sort of positive effect on location of the nuclear power plants, and the number that is smaller than 0 has some sort of negative effects. And what we can see is that, again, the population size of the the population size of 300 kilometer radius, excluding the municipal population size, the population size of the municipality itself, had some sort of positive impact, whereas the population size of the radius surrounding 30 kilometer radius surrounding the municipality had some sort of negative effect. And you see that the sort of donut-shaped structure of population effect. Nuclear power plants have to be far enough but close enough. That's the sort of underlying mechanism. And in addition to that, what we found out was that the lower house government party vote share has moderately positive effect when I get the all municipalities as the sample of this equation, we get certainly a positive significant effect. But as we limit the sample to municipalities that are immediately adjacent to the sea, the coefficient is no longer significant. Another key finding is that nuclear power plant siting certainly requires a sort of coordination among lower house senior members, and the number of times the LDP politicians have been elected in that particular area had positive significant effect. And I also included some geographic terrain covariates, but they don't show significant effects when the sample is all municipalities. But when we limit the sample to municipalities adjacent to the sea, altitude has some positive effects. Altitude and altitude square has some sort of significant effects. So the location decisions are affected by the population size as well as the LDP senior politicians' presence. And I didn't include this story in this particular quantitative analysis, but let me also mention that location of nuclear power plants are also often accompanied by building up of economically beneficial infrastructures like Shinkansen. If you talk about, for instance, development of nuclear projects in Aomori, that was directly linked to extension of the Shinkansen line beyond Morioka. And similar discussions have been going on in the prefecture of Fukui. Fukui doesn't have a Shinkansen yet, but when the Japanese government, central government discussed the resuming of the operation of the nuclear power plants in Fukushima, the central government, well, the local governments, some of the local mayors opposing to the restarting of the operation, but the central government threatened the local politicians by suspending the Shinkansen projects. That's not part of the survival analytic methods, but there are stories like that. So economically risky NIMBY facilities and economically beneficial infrastructures often come in hand with each other historically. And if I were a graduate student, I would certainly be doing an interesting field research, interviewing politicians, both in Tokyo and local areas. Anyway, well, in many senses, this nuclear power plant and compensation for this resembles the relocation of Futema air bases in Okinawa. And these NIMBY facility programs have many things in common in many areas, but let me go more directly into the local government finance related to the nuclear power plants. So given this sort of covariates, the pattern of the covariates that affect location of the power plants, how would local residents as well as politicians respond? If you hear that nuclear power plants may be coming to your neighborhood, what would be your response? My hometown actually had the possibility of housing 1 or 2 nuclear reactors historically. But Tohoku Electricity Company ended up locating that particular power plant in Onagawa area. If they had decided to locate the nuclear power plants in my hometown, perhaps my hometown would have been equipped with extension of bullet train, easier access to Tokyo, but the side effect, the flip side might have been something like that. But anyway, because Japan has a historical legacy of victimized country of a nuclear weapon, that in the early post-war period, there was strong opposition against any sorts of nuclear projects. So the government orchestrated a careful publicity project to soothe the local opposition. And in addition to that, the local government finance scheme somehow pleased the local political elites in addition to local residents at large. But if you try to quantitatively assess how much compensation was paid, we have some sorts of difficulty in the sense that private sector agents spontaneously respond to the whole variety of policy interventions. Even if local government receive a significant amount of grants, if consumers avoid buying produce from nearby areas, the farmers' incomes may go down. In that particular scenario, perhaps the government compensation may be enough to make up for the income damage farmers may be suffering. So let me take a look at the income data to have an idea of it. But the methodological difficulty is that there are not many municipalities with nuclear power plants. There are 26 of it. And because the nuclear power plants locations are strategically decided, we often face what is called endogeneity bias whenever we simply calculate the, we simply run the regression equation. Before that, this is how the formula for the local government finance looks. So the vertical axis is basically the billion yen. If you go up, a larger amount of financial inflows to that particular local community. So this is the timeline, and 0 corresponds to the start of the environmental assessment. And year 10 corresponds to the start of the operation. So this is the total amount. So in the first few years, the government delivered some sort of research grants to the local community, whose amount is tiny. But after the start of the construction, the government start to pay a decent amount in the form of promotion grant. As the project is completed, the construction phase ends, the promotion grants is not large, but the local government actually start to collect big property tax from the electricity company. So in year 10, which is the start of the operation of the nuclear power plants, the local government's revenue jumps up. But the intriguing thing is that the local government's revenues start to depreciate from year 1. because the monetary value, asset value of the nuclear power plants depreciate, the amount of property tax the local government collects also decreases over time. So there are interesting incentives locked in this government finance formula. As the government enjoys collecting larger tax revenues out of the nuclear power plants, and because the amount of the tax revenues decreases over time, as time elapses, the local government is tempted to build another reactor in that. That's one of the reasons why the Fukushima Daiichi and Daini plants have so many nuclear reactors within the same municipality, which complicated the nature of the accident significantly, unfortunately. So environmental assessment, construction, operation. So this is the total tax revenue the local governments collect. This is an idea. So this is out of a formula for a model municipality. There is not such a model municipality, but according to the Ministry of Economy's formula, the revenue should look something like this.
So what does that all add up to over a 40-year life of the plan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm going into right now. So this is basically the amount of taxes the local government's revenue. But if farmers in the nearby areas suffer from reputation damage, their net income may go down unless the local political elites deliver their slices of bacon to the affected farmers, right? That's the sort of empirical question I am delving into right now. So again, this is the amount the local government in question is receiving.
And when you say bacon to the farmers, can you explain concretely what kind of things you mean?
So the local government, depending upon the local government's policy, they may pay outright compensation. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, what has been common in Japanese politics is basically employing unemployed farmers in construction industry. Mm-hmm. Or relocating farmers to the utility-related service companies, for instance. What would be the net effect? That's the sort of question I am going into. So this is what is simple difference and difference regulation results. We simply took a look at the difference of these variables: tax revenue, grants from the central government, local allocated taxes, grants, local government expenditure, investment project, fiscal strength, and local residents' income across these time periods. Simply difference between 2075, 2077. Depending upon the variable, there are some differences in the time period, but basically the mid-1970s and year 2000. We simply took a difference between these two time periods and looked if municipalities with nuclear power plants had some sort of significant difference in terms of increase in income from other municipalities. What we found out was that basically municipalities with nuclear power plants had about 17万円, or how much in US dollars in today's exchange rate? Something like $2,500 dollars per year per capita. A faster growth in income per year. I'm not sure whether that is large enough amount, but that's basically the amount we could get by this simple regulation analysis framework. Otherwise, in all other municipalities, the annual per capita income rose 532K Japanese yen in other places. But if you take a look at municipalities with nuclear power plants, it appeared they had higher income growth. And local governments collected larger taxes, but they suffered loss of local allocated taxes, which is fiscal transfers from the central government. Because the municipalities with nuclear power plants start to collect decent tax revenues, they are less reliant upon fiscal transfers. And it appears that the income level of the local residents had some sort of positive effect. But because this simple methodology has a whole variety of methodological problems, like endogeneity, let me take a look at what is called results based on what is called synthetic control method. Basically, the idea behind the synthetic control method is that you compile a counterfactual by calculating the weighted average of similar municipalities. That are similar municipalities in the sense that those municipalities that belong to the control group look similar enough to the municipality that received the treatment. I mean, the nuclear power plants siting. We took a look at six nuclear power plants that started operation around 1980. And unfortunately, Fukushima Daiichi power plant that had the accident started its operation in the 1960s, and we don't have good enough data to keep track of what was going on in the Fukushima power plant and its nearby municipalities. But because Fukushima Prefecture has another nuclear power plant, Fukushima Daini plant, we took a look at what was going on with those municipalities. So basically, the control municipalities belong to the same prefecture as the municipality with the nuclear power plants. And I took a look at the income, local government spending, and LB's vote share as the outcome variable. So this is how Tomioka-machi, Fukushima Prefecture, which is located close to the Fukushima Daini plants, look. So this is the income per capita. The solid line is the income level of the municipality with the nuclear power plants. And the dashed line corresponds to the income level of the control group. As you can see, this is the start of the operation of the nuclear power plants. And as you can see, before the treatment, before the start of the operation of the nuclear power plants, the behavior of the control group and Tomioka-machi looks almost the same. But after that, the income of the Tomioka-machi started to go above the control group. But in the late 1980s, their income level converged, so there was not a big difference. But after that, after the Japanese economy entered a long recession, Tomioka-machi seems to have performed better than the control municipalities. That's what we have found out about this particular municipality in Fukushima. And I did some sort of placebo test. In this particular case, Kariwamura in Niigata Prefecture had a little bit of methodological problem, and we didn't get good enough approximation between the control group and the treatment municipality. And this is Onagawa, Miyagi Prefecture. And TEPCO and Tohoku Electricity Company are two different companies. Despite the fact that this particular nuclear power plant in question was much more closely located to the epicenter of the earthquake, this particular nuclear power plant survived the shock and tsunami. And apparently, the Tohoku Electricity Company has a team of seismological experts, and they have the capability to deliver conference papers in the Japanese Seismological Association's annual meeting. And they repaired and upgraded the nuclear power plants depending upon their finding. But unfortunately, TEPCO ignored advice from seismologists. That made a sharp difference between the performance of this particular power plant and Fukushima Daiichi plant. But that said, what was surprising was that the income level of Onagawa-machi, residents of Onagawa-machi, was not so different. There was a small positive effect immediately after the treatment, but after that, they don't perform so differently from other municipalities. Then how come they accommodated? If the compensation is so small, how come they had the incentive to accommodate the particular nuclear power plant, which is a big puzzling question.
And accommodate means what?
So unless the local governments compensate for damage for fishing income, for instance, how come local residents were willing to admit the local, nuclear power plants?
You mean continue it?
Yeah, continue. Yeah. How come
As
they were
opposed-
willing to live with it? That's the sort of question. I think we need to go into more in-depth field research to probe local resident sentiment more carefully. But as far as the quantitative data suggests, we don't have a strong enough difference between Onagawa-machi and its control group in terms of income level.
So in effect, you're asking why they didn't try to mount a massive citizen resistance to stop nuclear power in their community?
Perhaps.
Is that what you're asking?
Perhaps. One possibility is that because there was not a strong enough local opposition, the Tohoku Electricity Company or the local government or the central government did not have come up with big compensation package. Perhaps the civil society or the political culture of Onagawa-machi was a lot different from other places. I have no idea. I think I need to do more careful research on this.
But one clarifying question. So if you draw the previous graphs of, actually more pretend, like, you have a sharp increase in income and then declining and then increasing the tax revenue and that decline. So, so you're saying that for Onagawa-machi, there's no such opposition
So this is residents' income.
of residents?
So the previous chart I showed is the local government's tax revenue.
Okay.
So this is the amount of perks local politicians have access to, but not all local residents are local politicians. That's the point. So I'm thinking of what I'm looking at right now is the local residents' income at large. Well, so this is how the local government's tax revenue actually looked in Tomioka-machi in Fukushima Prefecture. Sharp jump immediately after the starting of the operation. So this is the total tax revenue. Sharp jump. And this is the total local government expenditure. Increase in construction projects and so on can be kept track of. This is the fiscal transfer. So the solid line is the amount of money coming from the central government to the local government. And as of the start of the operation, the amount of fiscal transfer decreases because the government starts to collect its own property taxes from the power company. And this was what was going on with the control municipalities. So as far as the local fiscal variable is concerned, we see a clear pattern in the government finance, but we see less salient pattern if we take a look at the local residents' income level, because there are also negative effects related to disappearing fishing industry and so on. Another surprising fact I have found out was that the LDP's vote share didn't have any sort of strong positive or negative correlation. And we failed to come up with a solid finding about the LDP's electoral performance in relation to the nuclear power plant projects. This is Onagawa. Onagawa had a strong LDP support. Perhaps this may be part of the story behind the small difference between the control municipality and the treatment municipality in terms of income. But after that, the LDP's electoral performance plummeted. This is Tomioka. Initially, the LDP was doing okay, but it's tapered off as time elapsed. Yep.
So I don't understand why these two stories aren't very
Mutually supporting. If the if the power company is making promises of local benefits, but then local benefits aren't coming, then the voters will lose their trust in the LDP and things will go down. So it seems to me it works together very nicely. At least in that Onagawa story.
Onagawa story. But the funny thing is that there was a new candidate running from the nearby municipalities from the opposition party. So that sort of personal vote story seems to be more a salient feature with this particular pattern. I wish I had come up with a strong enough evidence like what you just said. I'm investigating the cases carefully, but so far I have not been able to come up with a generalizable story like that. Yeah.
What about the smaller elections about electing the municipal level?
Yes. So what matters seems to be more or less about local elections, in particular local mayor's election, in addition to prefectural gubernatorial. So no matter which party the local politicians were affiliated with, electricity companies had a salient preference of making sure that mayors and council members that are supportive of the nuclear power plants are elected and form a majority coalition in the local council. In that case, it's highly difficult to keep track of the partisan electoral performance because, as you know, most local politicians in Japan are non-partisans, at least at the municipal level.
What about seniority?
Seniority. I haven't taken a look at the data yet. Perhaps mayor's seniority might have been affected, but seniority is a time-dependent variable, so I'm not sure if I can get a good enough variation in the plots. Yeah.
You mentioned you're not seeing substantial rise in ordinary residents' income, but what about benefits that wouldn't be considered part of income? I mean, if the local government spending is, they now have the best concert hall in the region, they have the best gymnasium, swimming pool, et cetera, et cetera. Those are benefits to the people but aren't considered income, isn't that correct?
So, yes, that part of unmeasurable utility is not reflected in the measures I collected. So what I am keeping track of is actually the monetary inflow to the residents' pocket. Perhaps because of higher quality swimming pools and libraries, local residents' welfare standard might have risen substantially. Yes, that's consistent with anecdotal evidence, and I completely agree with you. But if those amenities had some sort of positive productivity effect, the residents' income should have gone up also because they are economically beneficial. But it appears that this didn't happen so nicely. But still, if you think about a perk of, say, $2,000 a year per capita in your family, perhaps that might be already good enough pocket money. But still, whether that was enough to compensate for the damage exposed seems to be a different story. And I'm not sure whether this was a justifiable insurance mechanism a priori. At the vantage point of year after the accident, this is something we need to discuss more carefully. Yeah.
Was there any impact on the movement of the population? Because if there's better transportation to, you know, Tokyo from Amori, you know, maybe people would move there, which, you know, could potentially dilute the impact of the income benefit just because there are more people sharing that income benefit.
I think that's an excellent point. And we are investigating the income because that's an aggregate measure. And population is another aggregate measure. And if the compensation is great, it should attract a larger number of people to the neighborhood, right? Following the same logic. So one limitation, data limitation, is that the Japanese national census takes place every 5 years. And we don't get fine gradation in the data points because the number of time series data points is relatively small. But we have newly collected annual data set, so we may be able to analyze the question that you have just addressed. And yeah, I think that's a good point.
So why don't you go ahead and complete your presentation?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure we'll have a lot of
Okay,
questions.
so I don't have a, well, this is simply a summary of what I have just found out. And the nuclear power plant siting is a typical example of what would be a NIMBY politics. And the economic effect of the siting is positive in some municipalities, but it is questionable whether the compensation is justifiable given what's going on right now. So that's it, and I think I'd appreciate your questions and yeah, and comments.
Okay. So thank you so much for your presentation, and I know that there are a lot of questions. Can I just start just to make sure we all are on the same page here? So you're really studying 26 communities around
Yes.
Japan, because many of these have multiple reactors. So
Mhm.
26 communities, even though there are 56
Right.
power plants, it's 26 communities. And you're talking about developments that are occurring over quite a long period of time, from the
Mhm.
first nuclear power plant being constructed in, 1960,
Yep.
up until the last one was constructed 2003. And over that entire period, the LDP, with a few exceptions, the LDP was basically in power.
Mhm.
So that's the framework of this. So this is changes occurring over quite long periods of time. And I guess my question is, first of all, these are largely agricultural communities,
Mhm.
correct?
Right.
And so one of the questions you seem to be asking is, well, gee, why didn't over this long period of time, because farmers weren't getting some income benefit, why didn't they start supporting the LDP less? But this was also the party that was providing agricultural subsidies for what they were in fact growing. So they had, seems to me, perfectly good reasons to be supporting the LDP, quite independent of the nuclear power. So that would be one question. The other thing is that it seems to me your argument requires us to believe that farmers, 20 years after a nuclear power plant is built, believe that if they get pork, and you mentioned things like construction jobs, that they, in their mind, connect that to the once that the power plant, that the community accepted the power plant. And that, to me, just seems like a stretch. You know, people might get a construction job, but do they really think that, I have a construction job because 20 years ago our community accepted a nuclear power plant? So, in other words, how much are average people connecting the benefit structure you're talking about with the power plant?
Should I answer your question one by one? Okay. Yeah, one methodological difficulty is the persistence of the system, and we don't get a lot of political variation. And yeah, we were certainly investigating a long span of time, and according to several estimates, in one municipality, at least half of the population is somehow related to the nuclear power plants as part of their family income. For instance, the husband working for the nuclear power plants and the wife serving the lunches for the employees, and that sort of the story is often heard. And the way the construction jobs and farm subsidies are provided in the Japanese political system might also need a lot of careful analysis, because it's not necessarily the gross amount of money that matters politically. It's the sort of divide and conquer strategy local as well as central government politicians play in the community. The sort of selective incentives that operate in the local community might not necessarily be reflected in the gross numbers, which is a tricky part of any sort of quantitative analysis like that. Yeah. I'm not sure whether I answered your question fully, but I had this impression.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
So I have one small question and one sort of comment. But before that, actually, I would like to have something to say about the comment. And I think like there are two kinds of NIMBY problems. One is like a nuclear power plant. The biggest discussion is made when they decide whether to allow the nuclear plant to come in to their community. And but afterwards, like today is of course different after the disaster. But before they think that like they don't actually see a lot of smokes and every day, so it seems like solid structures, so feeling somehow safe. So they may accept existence. But like the another one or the other one is like the military base. They suffer like noise and stuff on a daily basis and safety. So in that case, like if they benefit, if they get some benefit, they may associate those benefits with those problems. And I my small question is about the income of municipal residents, and is it disposable income because like maybe they have tax breaks, so they, if you measure the gross income, that actually is taken out. And also, you can actually add income and the expenditure of the municipality, expenditure by the local governments to have a better measure of that the discrepancy between the target group and the control group. And another one is that so your research question is basically to assess the stream of the monetary the positive impacts on those the local governments in exchange for the nuclear power plant. But of course, like for NIMBY problems, of course, like the government or those the funds to pay for that. So what is more interesting is would be the characteristics for the nuclear plants. So like as opposed to the military cases, for example, or the other NIMBY problems.
Thank you very much for excellent suggestions. Yes, nuclear power plants, the risk of nuclear power plants in ordinary time is difficult to assess or difficult to perceive from the standpoint of the local residents simply because of the lack of smell or smoke. Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's why nuclear power plants siting is often so politicized and ideologically polarized. Well, military bases have the same problem, but I think the sort of variables that constructivists would care about matter much more in nuclear power plants. That's why the TEPCO company and other utility companies in Japan have paid so much advertisement money and controlling the in trying to affect the perception of the risk and benefits associated with the nuclear power plants. In the case of the military bases, I don't think that was the case. I don't think the self-defense force paid a lot of publicity money to justify their cause, because the national security sort of concern is, I think, duly justified and accepted by a large number of Japanese residents, despite intensive burden on the shoulder of people in Okinawa. And I think this sort of comparison of different kind of NIMBY sites requires much more careful discussion, and I appreciate your comments about it. And whether the income was disposable or not, whether I should look at tax breaks and loopholes is technically difficult but interesting problem to look at. And what I looked at is actually tax-based income data. And as far as the data which was shown in my slides are concerned, they are all captured as taxable income. So all the dirty money which are not captured in the taxation process are simply ignored. Well, this is obviously the case with most other economic variables, but that's something that local residents might actually care about. And well, Miriam Golden at UCLA took a look at the presence of physical infrastructure as opposed to the monetary input. That's how she approached the problem of corruption in government spending. And I might actually have taken a look at the number of, say, swimming pools instead of incomes, the number of hospital beds per person instead of the variation in the income, to have a better sense of what was the welfare standard of these local residents. And I think I have to I cannot appreciate enough for your input. Yeah, that's something I think I will try to do together with my co-author. By the way, this is a joint research project with a PhD student at Uppsala University, Mr. Michihito Ando. So I think I have to acknowledge his contribution first. Thank you.
Shun Fujihira.
So, I think it's a very brilliant project. It's really nicely received. And I guess 2 points, last 2 questions. One is, I'd like to ask if you think this next step is worth thinking about, which is to trace the demographic trend before siting. So in other words, not the absolute number, but let's say 5 to 10 years as a kind of a lagged variable, the trend, and then post siting of the nuclear power plant, what happens to the local population. And again, that's very complicated to some extent, but something like that in which one of the main problems in Japan is demographic decline in rural areas. So whether that's something you think might be worth pursuing. And the second question I had was, if you could go back to the couple of slides back about the Tomioka Machi. So basically, I think it's kind of hard to differentiate different impacts, but sort of the point you made about how nuclear power plants and highways and dams and these kinds of things tend to go together as both the positive and negative side of NIMBY politics. And so, but this, I presume, sort of includes it's a general aggregate figure.
Right.
Again, I'm not sure if it's worth thinking about disaggregating what's happening, but anyway, so these are kinds of the two sort of thoughts I had. If you have some thoughts on it.
Yeah, so most nuclear power plants are located in rapidly depopulating areas anyway, and that's why we need to care about endogeneity in our analysis. And it appears that the demographic effects depends upon places. In Fukushima, for instance, there are large number of nuclear power plants, 6 in Fukushima Daiichi and another 6 in Fukushima Daini. And because the nuclear industry is so large that the industry had started to accommodate a large number of people. So in comparison with the control municipality, it appears that these municipalities retained larger population. This is a little bit premature conclusion. But if you take a look at other places like Tomari Genpatsu or Onagawa, where there are only 2 or 3 nuclear reactors, engineers commute from Sapporo or Sendai. And the nuclear industry is not large enough to accommodate a big population size. And it appears that the depopulation didn't stop at all. And there was not a significant difference from the control municipality. That's one part of my premature conclusion, although I didn't show the slides explicitly to you. And Tomioka-machi is located in the coastal area of Fukushima. And if you project the geographic map of how infrastructure is configured in Fukushima, all the economically beneficial infrastructures in Fukushima Prefecture went through what is Nakadori area, Koriyama, Fukushima, and then going in up north to Sendai. And they bypassed the Fukushima, the Fukushima Daiichi and Daini power plants. If you take a look at, for instance, say Kariwa Genpatsu in Niigata Prefecture, they are close enough to the city of Niigata. And local residents in that surrounding area might have reaped the benefit of the economically beneficial infrastructures. So I have to say that ideally, taking a look at the highway construction and bullet train, taking a look at the aggregates is something I'd like to do ideally, but I have to say that it depends upon the distance and the way infrastructures are configured. In this particular case, I think this is more orthogonal to beneficial infrastructures like Tohoku Shinkansen, which started its operation in 1982. I think this is a net effect of nuclear power plants. But if you take a look at Onagawa, for instance, Tohoku Shinkansen started operation in this period. And because both Onagawa and Sendai received the same benefit, it's really difficult to separate that. What is funny about this Tomioka-machi's income pattern, time series variation of the income pattern as opposed to the control municipality, is that when the economy was booming in the late 80s, the difference between Tomioka-machi and the control municipality was shrinking. When the Japanese economy went into recession, the other municipalities suffer from loss of tax revenues, whereas Tomioka-machi enjoyed stable income revenue sources because of the nuclear power plants. So, one indication of rent seeking or productive economic activities, not necessarily directly linked to, the local residents' incomes in nuclear power plants and its surrounding areas are not necessarily linked to the health of the macroeconomy so much. Although this does not necessarily apply to other nuclear power plants. And its surrounding municipalities.
You had your hand up earlier, did you? No, okay, sorry. Ted, go.
Thanks, Jim. This is really, there's a lot to think about here. And I'm going back to your first, just the title slide. Do nuclear power plants help the local economy? Your answer seems to be not so much. So, a little bit of extra cash in the pockets, and a little bit and some tax revenue initially, but then it diminishes. So then, if you are going home to your hometown in Yamagata, and somebody there says, "Oh, we have an opportunity to get a nuclear power plant," how do you advise localities now? Why would anyone ever want one of these things? Other than the LDP votes and sort of self-interest of the politicians.
Would you like my former politician's opinions or scholar's opinion?
Yes.
Well, when I was in politics, my campaign organizations included the labor union of Tohoku electricity industry. And I think I was properly briefed about what was going on in Onagawa power plants. And I think I maintained friendly relationships with the Tohoku electricity company. And I pay decent respect to the way they survived the earthquake. So in that sense, I was not necessarily seriously anti-nuclear power plant as I was serving in the Diet. But because the data is like this, if I were asked if my hometown would want to house another nuclear power plant, I would advise my hometown fellows to oppose. Perhaps we should build a more ecologically friendly solar or geothermal, because Yamagata Prefecture has a large number of hot springs, and there are substantial amount of green energy development opportunities in the area. And I'm not necessarily against nuclear power plants based on ideological standpoint. I'd say it's based on more economic rationale. The rising cost of back-end cost. I mean, the rising back-end cost, in addition to increasing construction cost, is that the construction cost of nuclear power plants per wattage is increasing over time, whereas that for the solar or geothermal has been declining exponentially. And I think there is a lot more economically strong rationale to prefer the latter. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Knafel from USC. As you mentioned, the local area which has nuclear power plants enjoying the subsidy and compensation from central government or TEPCO or something. Back in 20 years ago, I was in the Fukushima Prefecture. I was in the bureau, the Shinbun bureau. I witnessed these areas enjoying the luxury city hall, luxury pool, gymnastics, or something like that. So I'm very amazed. But now, after the accident, the nuclear power plants become real NIMBY facilities, troublesome facilities. So if the government decided to resume the operation of the nuclear power plants, local towns, villages, not say okay if they didn't, if they doesn't have enough money as a compensation like that. So how do you envisage the future image of these towns that has troublesome facilities like but same thing will continue as you mentioned, I suppose.
As I took a look at the number of children in Fukushima Prefecture, there has been a 7% pointage reduction in the number of children who go to school in prefecture, Fukushima prefecture, it appears that a large number of parents and the kids migrated to other areas after the accident. And in addition to that, the lost income and delayed compensation, everything combined, seems to be much severer than was previously expected. But this data set only incorporates the pre-accident numbers, and I think I obviously need to discuss what was going on after the earthquake in terms of substantive damage in setting up the paper. Yeah. Thank you for your suggestion.
Yes, in fact.
Hi. So this might be a bit of a simplistic comparison, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. And I don't know how much you can speak on it, but so you're saying that the incentives or the income gain that the residents around the nuclear power plants are getting is not that significant in terms of what you think it should be. What if that money instead went to safety engineering of the nuclear power plants? Because then you would reduce the risk of any kind of, you would reduce the risk of a need for compensation, right? So I don't know what your opinion is on that.
Well, I in general, I think that relates to how the local residents, as well as the managers of those electricity companies, perceive of risk and benefits in general. As far as the case of Fukushima is concerned, I have to point out that typical nuclear power plants are not located in their own service area. You know, I am a native of Tohoku area, and whenever I talk about the Civil War in the United States, I compare my hometown as Japan's South. I know Susan is from Georgia, but whenever, you know, American novels are translated into Japanese, Southern accents are usually translated into Tohoku accents.
Really?
Yeah. Amazingly. And TEPCO is owned and operated by the victor of the Japanese Civil War that led to the Meiji Restoration. And the nuclear power plants are located in the loser's territory. Whereas if you take a look at Tohoku Electricity Company's Onagawa power plant, the locals built the power plants and own and operate it. So the way risk and perceived and, you know, getting prepared for the accidents, I mean, the way the corporate managers internalize the risk was sharply different between Tohoku Electricity Company and TEPCO. I'm not willing to extend this sort of what might sound like a conspiracy theory, but I think this sort of mentality or internalization of the risk is core nature of the current accident.
Yes, Mr. Butcher.
I'm from Asahi newspaper, and I'm also a native of Tohoku. And I'm a follower of your Twitter. Okay. And my question is, you mentioned that the incentive of local government to accept more power plant because of the depreciation of property tax.
Yeah.
And but some prefecture governments introduced new taxation on nuclear power plant. That is nuclear fuel.
Yeah, nuclear fuel taxes are collected by the prefecture government instead of municipal.
So,
Yes.
I'm curious about that. Are there any difference of incentive between Shichosan? Property tax is belonging to Shichosan, and so are there any difference between the incentive between Shichosan and prefecture government?
So okay, I haven't conducted a serious interview research with the parties and politicians concerned. So this is nothing more than my speculation. But on the other hand, because I belong to the what is called rational choice paradigm of political science, I define the utility function and speculate what might happen in equilibrium. And this is what I think. So there is sharp discrepancy of interests between the prefecture and municipal government. The prefecture governor takes care of the overall economic as well as safety standards of the wider jurisdiction, whereas the municipal governments have to deal with more narrowly concentrated parochial costs and benefits. And for that purpose, prefecture governors cared more about side payment in terms of infrastructure. For instance, if you take a look at the history of Aomori Prefecture, you might notice that LDP local party caucus once threatened to defect from the party when the Shinkansen project was downgraded to mini Shinkansen. And that was actually recovered, the full standard construction project was recovered after their protest. And the prefecture governor election was part of that particular story. Whereas municipal governors of Rokkashomura or Higashidorimura might not have cared enough about Shinkansen per se. I haven't conducted an interview, so this is nothing more than a hunch. And nuclear fuel taxes pertain more to continuation of the operation. As the nuclear power plants keep operating, the prefecture government collects the taxes. But if I were a prefecture governor, I would need to reap votes from municipal voters that live far away from the nuclear power plants. Say I were a prefecture governor of Niigata. I need to get votes from residents of Sado Islands in order to get elected. And they live far away from nuclear power plants. And if I were a village chief of Kariwamura, I need to care only about the voters in that particular village. And who care about the income levels of Sado Islands, tourist industry? If I were a myopic, egocentric politician, I would behave like this. Although I know that there are other considerations, and politicians are not this stupid or myopic, but this is
Just to clarify, you were saying a moment ago that if a community were thinking about a nuclear power plant, your advice based on your own research would be don't do it. But in realistic terms, looking at recent survey data, thinking, for example, about an NHK survey back in October, only 2% of the Japanese public would like to see more nuclear power plants. And in fact, 23% say that they want to maintain the status quo, but a vast majority of the population either want to get rid of them or to decrease the number. So is this just hypothetical? Do you actually believe that there will be efforts to build new nuclear power plants? I'm trying to get a sense of what you really think the prognosis here is for nuclear power in Japan.
In addition to the general pattern of the public opinion, I think we need to take a look at the coalition behind the electricity company. And the labor union has been supportive of the electricity company's labor unions have been supportive of the DPJ, and the company's managerial board has been financially in support of the LDP. And this sort of nuclear coalition might be going anywhere which may be in an orthogonal way to the public opinion trend. And I think we need to take a look at both political elites and the mass opinion. And my hunch is that there is a strong enough interest group which might want to revert the situation to the status quo before the accident. But I don't think it's politically profitable to pursue a large, further construction of the nuclear power plants. Perhaps resuming the already existing power plants would already be politically costly, and that would be the center of the political discussion. And there are other matters like what to do with the accelerated nuclear power generators, or what to do with the spent fuels.
Yes? And then Andy Gorm.
To go a little bit deeper into that, my understanding is that the majority of nuclear power plants in Japan now are not operating because they're undergoing stress tests.
Only 3 or 2 are
6 are in operation.
as of January. As of February,
3?
yes, 5th. Yeah, it's already 3 or so.
And my understanding is that possibly by the summer, no nuclear power plants in Japan will be operating.
Yes, that's a possibility. But I have to mention that other sorts of power generators have been in operation, and if you were an engineer, you might be cautious about keeping these power plants running at full speed all the time, several months a year. They need to check up, and I'm not sure whether the capacity would be enough. As far as I know, I think the Japanese economy would be okay even without the nuclear power plants, except for some, peak loads, months and weeks and hours. And what to do with the peak loads is something I don't know. I'm not technical experts on this.
Andy Gordon?
Yes, I just have more of a comment than a question, but this was fascinating presentation, and I really enjoyed the discussion. And I love, as a historian, I love the analogy to the lingerie of Japan and the American political scene. I think I'll use that in my lecture. But I'll try to remember to attribute it with properly. The question is, the comment is about, it seems to me there are 2 projects here. And one of them, to me, seems both really valuable and very feasible, and the other seems potentially valuable but impossible. So the first one is the project that's in your title, the nuclear power plants help local economy. And that's a sort of political economy project. And you laid out some analysis on that based on sort of pre-March 11 calculations of value and costs, and then people suggested you should look at gymnasiums and this and that, and you can incorporate, and I think you could do something really valuable. The second paper or project is, do nuclear power plants help politicians who bring them get reelected? And that's a completely different question, and I'm not convinced that there's a feasible answer to that, because there's so much else that goes into political life, and I'm not sure why you're even pursuing it. I guess my suggestion is to do the first project really well would be extremely valuable. And then to do a recalculation of all of those analyses based on the post-March 11 change in things like property values. I don't know what's going on. I know that in Fukushima there are some properties the government is now evaluating as zero worth because it's been so contaminated. But then there must be concentric circles out of that of reduced property. And I wonder what's happening in the vicinities of other plants that weren't damaged about declining value of property of various types. You have to work that into your analysis, and I think it would be really fascinating to learn. Of course, it depends on what happens, but as a long-term project, I think it's really worth, and it sort of relates to these questions about the political and social feasibility of ever returning to nuclear power. But it's a really important set of questions.
Yeah, property value is something we are looking at.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well,
And there is pre-March 11 story and post-March 11 story in this particular project. And there may be several papers out of this. And yes, we are most likely to chop down the electoral side of the story. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your suggestion.
I'm afraid we're at the end of our time. I'd like to thank all of you for coming today and thank our speaker for a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.